Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into the world of method acting, or should I say, a certain kind of method acting.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're going to be looking at a list from Listverse, you know that website. Anyway, they compiled 10 stories of actors who were, shall we say, enhanced while filming some pretty memorable scenes.
And amps.
Yeah, under the influence, we're talking everything from upcoming films like The Substance all the way back to classics like Easy Rider.
Wow, that's quite a range. It makes you think about how far actors are willing to go to really embody a role.
It definitely blurs the lines, right? So let's jump right in with an example that's creating a buzz even before it's out. Margaret Qualley in The Substance, which is a body horror film set to come out in 2024.
Body horror.
Yeah, think like visceral, unsettling, all that.
Okay, I'm getting the picture.
Qualley plays Sue, who's a clone of Demi Moore's character. And get this, she's born from her back.
Oh, wow, that's creepy.
It is. And in the film, there's a scene where Sue's leading this hypersexualized dance class, and it basically catapults her to fame. But Qualley herself, not so comfortable with that level of, let's call it expressiveness.
It's interesting, right? Actors are expected to push boundaries, but what happens when those boundaries get a little personal?
Exactly. So to get through the scene and deliver that high-energy performance, she actually turned to a mix of weed and tequila. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, when is it pushing the boundaries and when is it blurring them?
It definitely adds a layer of complexity to method acting, that's for sure. It becomes less about just immersing yourself in the role and more about altering your state of mind.
It really does. Now, sometimes that altered state is completely unintentional, which brings us to a Halloween favorite, Hocus Pocus. Omri Katz, who played Max, the teenager who accidentally brings the Sanderson sisters back, he was, allegedly, high on cannabis during the scene where he gets hit with that magic bolt.
Oh, wow. Really? I never knew that. It makes you think about the pressures of Hollywood, especially for young actors.
Right. He was just a teenager at the time, already dealing with the whole Hollywood scene. It's a whole other side of the industry that we don't often consider. And it seems like that experience was a bit of a wake-up call for him, actually. He ended up rethinking his relationship with the substance.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Shows a lot of maturity, especially at that age.
Definitely. And it highlights how these experiences are so individual. What might be a way to cope for one actor can be a whole different story for another.
Absolutely.
So let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about weed and tequila, but what about a role that involved a different kind of discomfort, shall we say? Margot Robbie's breakout role in The Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, yeah, that was a pretty controversial film.
It was, and we all remember that infamous nude scene.
Right.
Well, Robbie chose to do the scene completely nude, even though Scorsese actually offered her alternatives.
Wow, that's a bold move.
Hmm.
She must have really wanted to portray the character authentically.
She did. But can you imagine the nerves? Filming a nude scene for a Scorsese film?
I can't even imagine.
So, to calm her nerves before stepping onto the set, she took 3 shots of tequila.
Liquid courage, huh? It's a good reminder that even seasoned actors get nervous, especially in those kinds of situations.
It definitely humanizes them, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go from Wall Street to a galaxy far, far away. We have to talk about Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia herself.
A legend.
Right. Well, during the opening scene of The Empire Strikes Back, the one on the icy planet Hoth, Fisher was reportedly high on cocaine.
Really? Wow, I never would have guessed. That's pretty shocking, actually. It's sad, too, knowing her struggles with addiction.
It really is. It reminds us that even our heroes, the people we look up to, they have their own battles they're fighting.
It definitely adds another layer to her performance, knowing what we know now.
It does. And it raises the question, how do we as viewers reconcile the art with the artist's struggles? Does it change how we see the film, or does it just add to the complexity of it all?
It's a tough question, for sure.
Okay, let's switch gears again. Go for something completely different. Apocalypse. Now, that Vietnam War film by Francis Ford Coppola, have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, it's intense.
Oh, intense. Remember that opening scene where Martin Sheen's character, Captain Willard, completely loses it in his hotel room?
The mirror smashing, the blood. Yeah, it's hard to forget.
Well, Sheen was actually drunk during filming. And here's the kicker. The mirror smashing and the blood, totally unplanned.
No way.
Yeah. Coppola saw how raw and powerful it was and kept it in the film.
Wow, talk about a happy accident.
Right. Method acting meets serendipity. Sometimes the best moments happen when you least expect them. And sometimes those moments are a little less welcome, like what happened to Joey King on the set of The Kissing Booth 3.
What happened?
On her last day of filming, she accidentally got, in her words, violently high on edibles.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she was super paranoid, barely able to speak, but she pushed through and filmed a whole confrontation scene on a boardwalk.
That's wild. I wonder if being high actually affected her performance, or if it was just sheer willpower getting her through it.
It's a good question, isn't it? How do these altered states impact what we see on screen?
I mean, and that makes you wonder how often this sort of thing happens in Hollywood.
Exactly. Now, for a dose of 90s comedy, let's talk about Billy Madison. Norm Macdonald, who plays Billy's friend Frank, the one who's always drinking. Well, he decided to take his role pretty literally.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, he chose to actually be drunk for most of his scenes. There's even a story about him passing out by the pool, completely inebriated, which held up filming.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious, but also a bit concerning.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line between being dedicated to the role and, well, just having a bit too much fun?
Right. It definitely blurs the lines. Speaking of blurring lines, Jennifer Lewkens had an interesting experience filming Passengers.
I love her. What happened?
This was her first on-screen sex scene, and she admitted to getting really, really drunk beforehand to deal with the anxiety.
I can understand that. Those scenes can be pretty nerve-wracking.
Totally. It highlights the pressure actors face, especially when it comes to intimate scenes like that.
It makes you think about the tools they use to cope with those pressures.
It does. And sometimes those tools can be a bit much, even for experienced actors. Like Billy Bob Thornton in Bad Santa. He plays a department store Santa with a drinking problem.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Well, for the scene where he trashes the Santa's grotto, he started the day with wine, switched to vodka, and finished with beer. By the time they started filming, he was genuinely confused and disoriented.
Wow, that's taking method acting to the extreme.
It is. It makes you wonder where acting ends and just living the character's lifestyle begins.
That's a slippery slope for sure.
It is. Okay, to wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's go back to the counterculture classic Easy Rider. Remember that scene around the campfire where Jack Nicholson's character George gets introduced to marijuana?
Oh, yeah, that's an iconic scene.
Well, Nicholson was very much living in that spirit during filming. He apparently smoked over 150 joints to gradually achieve the desired effect.
150 joints.
Hmm.
Wow, that's commitment.
It makes you wonder, was it truly necessary for the role, or did it just add to the film's legendary status?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Peeking behind the curtain like this, we see the choices these actors make, the pressures they deal with, and how their personal experiences, sober or not, might have shaped the movies we watch.
It really is, and it raises so many questions. Stay tuned for part 2, where we delve even deeper into this world. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our deep dive. In part 1, we really started to see how anxieties, personal struggles, even just accidental stuff, played a role in actors using substances on set.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening, wasn't it? But sometimes it's not about coping. It's about, like, a deliberate choice, a method, to really get into character.
Method acting, right.
Mm.
It's fascinating how actors can blur those lines between themselves and the roles they play. Like, for example, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Iron Man, that whole franchise.
Yeah.
We all know about RDJ's past, his struggles,
Right. He's been pretty open about it.
But here's the thing. During filming, he was sober. However, there were rumors that he'd bring small amounts of drugs and alcohol onto the set. Not to use, though. It was more like props almost,
Yeah.
to connect with that darker side of Tony Stark.
Wow, that's next level commitment, using those things as, like, symbols or something.
It's like he was trying to create an environment where those elements of Stark's personality felt real, tangible, blurring that line between fiction and reality.
Sure.
Who knows, maybe that contributed to how authentic his performance was.
Authenticity, that's what so many actors are after, isn't it? But how far is too far? We talked about tequila shots and edibles, but some actors, they take it way further. Like Shia LaBeouf, when he was preparing for Fury, that World War II film, he played a soldier.
Oh yeah, his preparation was intense. He went method, like full method. Didn't bathe for weeks to try and replicate the conditions, the dirt, the grime. There are even stories about Brad Pitt trying to stay upwind of him.
Oh, man, I can imagine. That's dedication, but it also sounds pretty rough on everyone around him. That's not even the craziest part.
Oh no, there's more. LaBeouf, he got a dentist to actually remove one of his front teeth to make his character's injuries look real. And he even cut his own face with a knife to create scars.
Whoa, hold on. That's a bit much, isn't it? Like, I understand being dedicated to the role, but that's almost like self-harm.
It definitely crosses a line for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how far is too far, right? When does dedication become I don't know, dangerous. And think about the crew, everyone on set. Not everyone's going to be okay with that level of intensity.
Yeah. It's true. Filmmaking is a team effort, and you have to be mindful of the people around you. Speaking of intense methods, we can't forget Daniel Day-Lewis, right? He's considered one of the greats, but he was notorious for staying in character for months, even when they weren't filming.
His dedication was legendary. In My Left Foot, where he played that writer with cerebral palsy, he refused to leave his wheelchair. Like he'd have the crew carry him around, feed him, all that.
It's amazing, that level of commitment, but also kind of disruptive, don't you think? It must have been so demanding on everyone.
It was. And while his performances were incredible, praised for being so authentic, his methods definitely caused some tension on set sometimes.
Hmm?
It's a tough balance, being dedicated but also not, making things harder for everyone else.
Yeah, it's like a constant theme we're seeing, isn't it? Trying to find that balance between like your artistic vision and the reality of making a film. It makes me think about actors who can give those amazing, powerful performances without going to such extremes. Meryl Streep, for instance. She's incredible, can play anyone, but she's also known for being super professional, right?
She's the queen of transformation, but without all the drama. Her preparation is intense, but she can switch in and out of character so easily. It just shows that there are different ways to get there to
Yeah.
achieve that authenticity. You don't have to go to those crazy lengths.
Right, right. It's so interesting, all these different approaches. So, as we're going through this deep dive, it's becoming pretty clear that the relationship actors have with their methods, whether it's using substances or these extreme forms of immersion, it's complicated, right? There's a whole spectrum. Some actors find that balance and others just push it to the limit.
And that brings up a big question, doesn't it? Do those methods actually serve the art form? Or do they end up being more about personal stuff, struggles, coping mechanisms, and at what cost? To the actor, to the people around them.
These are all really good points, and we're going to keep exploring them in the final part of our deep dive. We've seen how actors use substances, extreme methods to cope with all sorts of things, to find their characters, to blur the lines between what's real and what's not. But what does it all mean? How do we even make sense of it as viewers? Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll tackle all those big, thought-provoking questions. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've uncovered some wild stories, haven't we? Actors, substances, filming. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it really makes you think about what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
All the stuff we don't see.
It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain, right? The glamorous world of Hollywood and all the, well, not so glamorous part.
Exactly. We often forget that actors are just people with real lives and problems and struggles, just like the rest of us.
And it makes you wonder, right? Like, how do we deal with this new knowledge? Does knowing that an actor was high or drunk while filming change how we see their performance?
Right. Does it ruin the movie for you? Or does it add like another layer of complexity to it all? It's tough to say, isn't it?
It really is. And it's something we've been grappling with throughout this whole deep dive. Like, how do we reconcile the art, the performance, with the artist, with their personal choices and struggles?
It's almost like we're forced to see the person behind the mask.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. There's always more to the story than we see on the surface.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. You get to the core and you realize, wow, there's a lot going on here.
And that's what makes this topic so fascinating, right? It's not just about judging or saying what's right or wrong. It's about understanding the complexity, the human element behind all of it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And it leaves us with so much to think about. What was the most impactful part for you? The thing that stuck with you?
For me, it's that question of intention, Were these actors using substances as a crutch? Or was it more about finding something deeper within themselves to really get into the role? Did it ultimately serve the art, or was it more about personal struggles? It's hard to know for
I
sure.
think that's a brilliant point. It's not about drawing conclusions, but more about recognizing that it's complicated. There are all these nuances. We're seeing real people with real stories behind those performances.
And those stories matter, right? It's a reminder that every film, every performance is influenced by so many factors. Some we see, some we don't.
So to wrap up our deep dive, I would encourage everyone listening to keep exploring, keep asking those questions. Go back and watch some of these films. Pay attention to those specific scenes and see how your perspective has changed.
Exactly. And remember, the best art makes us think, makes us talk, makes us challenge our assumptions, and that's what we've tried to do here today.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. It's been a wild ride.
Until next time, keep diving deep.